John Blaxland is a senior fellow at the Australian National University's Strategic and Defence Studies Centre. He served as Chief Staff Officer for the Joint Intelligence Operations and as Defence Attaché to Thailand and Burma. He spoke to political reporter Karen Binney a short time ago about the AUSMIN talks and the prospect of troops on the ground in Iraq.
John Blaxland, welcome to Capitol Hill.
Thank you,
first of all, just give us an overview of what exactly AUSMIN is and the significance of it.
Well, AUSMIN is the annual talks between the Defence and Foreign Ministers of the United States and Australia, in the United States case, the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defence. And they have, over the years, dealt with a number of issues to do with force posture in terms of relationship between the US Armed Forces and the Australian Defence Force, particularly concerning Australia's region, but also in terms of engagement in the Middle East, but mostly about the region.
There's being a deal signed today between Australia and the United States for the force posture agreement, it's called. How is that going to benefit Australia, or is it going to be mainly a benefit for the United States?
Well, it depends on how you look at it. You know, the positioning of additional Marines in Darwin has potentially significant benefits in terms of opportunities to collaborate with US Armed Forces in Australia. The training opportunities, particularly as operational opportunities drop off in the Middle East and elsewhere, the training opportunities in Darwin for Australians and Americans to train together is actually pretty useful.
Keep the skills up.
Yeah, and it's also, I mean, the Americans are also looking to engage around the region. And one country that, of course, is very important to Australia is the relationship with Indonesia. Now, the fact that the US troops are based in Australia means that they're far enough away from Indonesia to not be a direct concern to Indonesia, but convenient enough for them to be able to exercise with them occasionally at Indonesia's convenience.
Our political correspondent Greg Jennett is covering AUSMIN, and he's mentioned that previous years there's been discussion of things like space junk, but now at this meeting it's likely to be overshadowed by the issues in Iraq. Is this a reflection of a deteriorating security situation in the world?
Well, I think it's certainly, there are darker clouds on the horizon than there have been for some time. The situation in Iraq, in Syria, in Ukraine and elsewhere is certainly disturbing and is adding some momentum, some urgencies to some of the discussions. And what Australia is looking to do in Iraq in particular is particularly going to be a focus, no question. What is interesting to reflect on is whether the Prime Minister is going to be more front-footed than he's been already. We've got the C-130s, the Hercules, operating out of the Middle East that are engaged on the humanitarian assistance front. But you know, is there going to be more? It'll be interesting to see, because we're already seeing the Americans talking about perhaps ramping up their commitment. The no boots on the ground rhetoric has gone off the boil. So there are indicators that perhaps the United States is going to do a bit more to bolster the position of the Kurds and the Iraqi forces without being overly committed. Now, it's a tricky one. It's a fine balance. Whether Australia gets more involved, I mean, you know, there's obvious potentially alliance benefits in terms of Australia being seen to be a constructive contributor to the US alliance. And there's also a fairly compelling humanitarian assistance logic, if you like, for being involved. But there are real concerns about this being a situation that could unravel significantly and deteriorate further.
And you're suggesting potentially down the track there could be US and potentially Australian troops on the ground with a different, I guess, mantra to last time because of the humanitarian issue. Yeah,
well, that's right. I mean, the last time we were in Iraq, it was under a bit of a cloud. You know, we supported the US over the invasion in 2003. We went back in 2005. To a certain extent, we're a bit uncomfortable about going back in. And, of course, politically back home, that wasn't selling well anyway. But now we've got this issue of a humanitarian crisis. There are compelling reasons for us to exercise that what Gareth Evans would call the responsibility to protect. And I think that in this case, that is a fairly compelling one. And, of course, so that makes it very different for the Abbott government now to the situation that John Howard faced before. There isn't going to be the political acrimony over this. So there needs to be some measured and very carefully calibrated thinking and planning about what we could do, how we could work with the Americans and perhaps the Brits and the French and others.
And do you think some of that planning will be happening at AUSMIN today, or was that down the track?
Oh, look, I suspect they'll be talking about that. They're familiar with each other. The relationship is fairly robust. They would have had significant briefings in advance about the situation both in the Middle East, in Iraq particularly, and in terms of the bilateral relationship in the region. I think they'll be happy to talk about it, and they will. They may not want to talk about it in public, and that's understandable, particularly if they haven't agreed to anything yet, but there will undoubtedly be some discussion about, so what next?
All right. Thanks for your time.
My pleasure.